Hi guys, I'm Ben, aka Wallaby, and welcome to Endgames with Wallaby. So no matter what level of chess player you are, I'm sure you've seen this position before. One pawn on the board, trying to push itself all the way up to make itself into a queen and win the game. Well, I believe that no matter what level of chess player you are, you can learn how to win this endgame. It is the most important endgame in chess, and there's only a few simple rules to learn. Of A, how to win it as white, or B, how to defend from any mistakes if you've got the black pieces. So this is winning for white, so we'll explain how we can get it done. The first step is that you want to get that king in front of the pawn. If you lead with the pawn, then black can easily just intercept it by moving the king up. So we'll use this king. The black king will approach, and what you notice about the king is that wherever it moves, well, we use the black king, it makes itself into a little barrier where the other king can't approach. Same thing with the white king, it's protecting these squares, right? So we have a special position in chess called the opposition. It is the most important rule of endgames. So what we're going to do right now is take the opposition. You've taken the opposition if you move your king in front of the opponent's king with one square in between. What it basically means is that this black king cannot approach any of these squares and make any progress in moving towards the pawn. But not only that, it has to either make a concession by moving backwards and away from the pawn, where we can just move the king up, or by moving to one of the sides. So let's see what happens when the black king moves to a side. Doesn't really matter which one. We're going to put our king here. What we've done is we've cleared a lane of protected squares where the pawn can move through to promote. So let's say the black king wants to approach our pawn, maybe go round the king and try and approach that way. We can just go ahead and check it. Obviously, black's going to want to move that king towards where we want to promote. So we'll just take the opposition, right? And we have those three squares controlled. Let's say black wants to step over there again. Now, it would be a mistake to push the king over here, because then black would be able to just go ahead and approach our pawn. So we'll instead push that pawn. Now you might be able to say, wait, black can step in front of that pawn now, but what do? Use that key move. Once again, we take the opposition. Once again, black having to move to one of the two sides. Once again, doesn't really matter which one, because we just step to the other side. A knight's move away like before. That's a knight's move. And we're protecting these three squares. So whatever black does, we're able to push the pawn, and promote that pawn. And that is all she wrote. Hopefully you know how to win with a king and a queen against just a king. Let me know if you'd like me to go over that endgame in the comments below. All right, let's move on to how black can draw an endgame if white makes a key mistake. We're going to go back a few moves to where white took the opposition. Of course, that was the best move. Black had to step aside and concede some squares for the pawn. But what if we didn't take the opposition here? What if white pushed the pawn here? Because it's pretty close to promoting, right? One would think that we can get there. Well, let's flip the board and see how black can deal with this. So if we have the black pieces, hopefully in the comments you can tell me what a key move is. And it's going to be this one. We're going to take the opposition, and the white king can't approach. So these are the three squares where we're controlling. None of those are available to the white king. And either the pawn gets pushed, or the king tries to go around and control those key squares from the other side of the board. Let's see what happens if the king tries to go around first. Well, we're going to step in front of that pawn. Now we have these squares controlled. So white has to make a waiting move. Obviously doesn't want to drop back and lose the pawn. So we're going to step back here, staying in front of the pawn and stopping it from promoting to the end of the board. And now white goes here, and what move do we make? Once again, I sound like a broken record, but we take the opposition. And you'll notice that we can, no matter what white does, we can just stay in front of that pawn, stay in front of the pawn until white gets to that 6th rank with the king, and we take the opposition. That's always going to be available to us if white has let the pawn get in front of the king. So let's see what happens in this position now if white decides to push the pawn. Well, hopefully you got it right. There's only one move that makes sense. We step right in front of that pawn, and no matter what white does on the next move, whether the king moves away from the pawn, well, it's just going to be lost. We can just capture it, and that's a draw. Or white can protect the pawn, and it's going to be stalemate. there's only 4 squares available for our king, and they are all taken by the king and the pawn. So remembering, if you've got the black pieces in a situation like this, stay in front of that pawn. When the king gets to the 6th rank, take the opposition, and then you'll have a draw. If you've got the white pieces, remember to keep that king in front of the pawn and use the opposition to protect those promotion squares and keep the king away. Okay, so we're back at this starting position here, and we're going to check out a version of this endgame that is drawing no matter what happens. So you can see here the pawns on the C file. We're going to go to a different position where the pawn is on the A file. The key thing about this is the pawn's on the edge of the board, and black can use the corner of the board to help stalemate himself. So we'll make the exact same moves. White goes there, black goes here, and white can take the opposition. But it doesn't really matter because once black moves here, well, there's no letter in the alphabet that comes before A, right? White can't move off to the side of the board and protect these 3 squares. So white has to keep the opposition, and we can just move back and forth until the cows come home. That's no problem. So that's not going to work, right? White is going to have to push that pawn eventually. We'll stay in front of the pawn. We can take the opposition, that's fine, because we're always going to have this square available to us. Let's say the king makes a waiting move, it steps back. We can go here, another waiting move, it goes back. And yes, white will be able to make progress, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So we reach a position where we get to the corner of the board. It looks a bit scary, it looks like we're getting kicked out and the pawn's going to promote, but we always have these 2 squares to go back and forth to. We can go here, and if the white king moves away, we can just attack that pawn. If it moves back to protect the pawn, we can also go to this square, and that's absolutely fine for us. So, you know, if we see this position, absolutely no worries, mate. And we're just repeating at the end of the day. We can go back here. It's just the same sort of thing. Now, if in that previous position, white decided to push the king out, we still have this A8 square. And no matter what white does, just like the previous position, it's going to be a draw after the king moves. If it moves away, we take the pawn. Or if it protects the pawn, it is stalemate. So that was hopefully helpful. We're going to move on to one bonus endgame of where the king is a little bit out of the picture. You can see that black is going to be struggle to make it to this corner of the board here. White has the next move, and they're able to actually control some of these squares to stop black from getting to that A8 square. So you might think this is dead lost, but let's stick to that general area. Try to keep the king near the A8 square. If white ever tries to move out of there, then we can just take control of it ourselves. That's not going to work for white. Just the same position as before. So the pawn has to keep pushing. Because we've let that king get to the side of the board, it's impossible. Once again, if we go here, we take control again. It's impossible for white to make progress. We can just keep moving back and forth once again till the cows come home. And that's going to be a draw. There's no way to make progress. If white ever decides to push this pawn, we can bring our king back here once again. And you can see the white king now has no squares, and that's going to be stalemate. So just remember, if that pawn's on the edge of the board, the side without the pawn can usually draw that position as long as it can either get the king to that A8 square or whatever corner it might be, or if it can get the king to a spot where it locks their opponent in the corner of the board. And guys, that will do it for today's endgame study. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of these in your own games, and maybe your opponent will make a mistake where you can resurrect the losing position. Let me know in the comments if there's any other types of endgames you like to go over, or any other variations you like to cover. And make sure you subscribe so you know when I'm posting a new video. Until next time guys, this is Wallaby, and I'll see you later.